everybody and welcome back to Stampin Squirrels. It is Debbie here, Squirrel 2. So today I've got this really great little fun card using the Give It a Whirl spinner dies, and so we're going to be making this card. It's super effective, and I'm going to be using the hand-penned petals to use this particular set to make the greetings. And so it's a really fun card. What I love about it is the watercolours, and as you can see, this paper is just divine. It's got all these lovely watercolour flowers and the colours are just amazing. Look at that, isn't that just lovely? So whilst I'm going to be using these papers, I'm going to be using the new Give It a Whirl spinner dies to make the cards. So just flick through the colours. This is a voiceover, incidentally. If you're wondering why it's not timed to perfection, because we forgot to record it when we were actually recording it, so it's got no sound, so I'm having to come back into it and do a voiceover, so I should get voiceover work. So here we go. Let me explain how the spinner dies work. So as you can see, look, you've got this little turny bit at the side of the card. This spins round and you've got different apertures here, and you can see that you can either stamp greetings in there or different images. So I've gone with the thanks on the spinner card here, and I've decorated it with just some of the dies and those gorgeous little bumblebees as little extra brads. They're just beautiful. I think it just adds to the whole effect of the card. So I've just sponged that flower in different colours, hues, and I've done another one with the blender pen. So depending on what you have to hand, you can use those. And these are the other little coloured, in colour little sort of flower brads as well. They're just gorgeous. And here's one that I've done, but this time using the birdhouse stamp set. And you can see here that along with the dies, you've got little dies for arrows. So it just helps people understand. And then what I've done here is I've stamped and heat embossed that little birdhouse in white and then cut it out. So spin it round, birthday wishes. It's a little bit tight, this one. That's my own fault because I put some little diamantes on it and it just made it a bit tight. There's the little birds. They're just gorgeous from the set. Another little birdhouse, and then you can see that I've put the little accessories on there, and that's what's making it stiff. My bad. But yeah, and then back to birthday wishes. So yes, there you go. That's the two spinner cards, and so I'm going to be showing you how to make that, the basics of which is really quite simple. So what do you need to get started? Well, before we get started, let me just show you the apertures. So the dies themselves actually come with 4 different types of apertures. So you can either have a circle, a rectangle, or a love heart look. And one of the easiest things to do is to cut yourself a little template. And then what you can do is use that template to go over your sentiments and your images and see which ones fits best. And so that's what I did on this instance. And I'm going to stick with the thanks for this particular card. But that's just a little handy tip if you're using the spinner dies. Okay, so these are the components in the dies. Here's the bit that goes on the front. And you can see that's the bit I've cut out with the DSP. And then there's the wheel inside. And then you can see the different compartments which you're going to stamp into. And so, as I said before, you decide what type of aperture you want, and that will help you decide what you're going to stamp and where. And then these are the other bits and bobs that come with the dies. So you get some great stars, some clouds. And then you can see you get a little banner there, and then here's the different arrows. You get a love heart, super cute. Some other little love hearts, and the arrows that I said that go on the spinner wheel. So you can decide one embosses and one actually cuts them out as a die, and you can actually then stick it on. And then there's this bit that goes around the scalloped edge that goes around the edge of the round aperture. It just finishes it off nicely. I think it looks really good. It makes quite a striking effect. So that's the dies. Let's pop them away. So what do you need to get started? Well, to get started, you need a card base. This is Misty Moonlight, 8 inches by 5.5 inches, scored at 4, and that makes just a little card base there. So 5.5 by 4 card base. Then you need a mat, a contrasting colour, 3 7/8 by 5 3/8 of an inch. And then on this card, I've used a DSP for my second mat. This is the hand-penned petals DSP. Beautiful it is. 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. And we're going to be using that die to cut that out And when it cuts out, you'll see that there's a little aperture there for where you put your finger in for the spinner part of the card. Just there it is. It also has this lovely little stitch effect around the edge, which is not very noticeable on the paper, but if you just used card, you would see it. It would have a little stitched effect. And then you need a piece of white card for the wheel, if that's what you choose to do, 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. You're going to cut that wheel out. And when it cuts out, what it does is leave a slight impression and a little dot in the centre. And so you can see very clearly where you need to stamp your greetings or your little images that you're going to stamp. Okay. So the next part of this is you've got all of your components together and you've cut them out. So you've cut this piece out with the other die, the big die, like that, and that will leave a little hole in it. There's the little hole there. And this is really important coming up because this is how you're going to make your placements all really, really accurate when you're putting the card together. So once you've stamped out the circle, you'll see that there's a hole in the centre, the pinwheel. And this is really important because you're going to use that little hole to line everything up when you put the card together, because we're going to be using a little brad in order to poke through that hole. So there we go. I'm just poking out the residue from the die. And here's my little tip. When this actually cuts out, it will leave an impression of those three, don't know what you'd call them, those three shapes onto the actual piece of card. But one thing that you can do is that if you have the dies, is that you can take a pencil and draw them in. And so this is an example of what not to do. You can see the pencil lines here. And I stamped those images before I actually drew the pencil lines in, and you can see that I went over the lines. And when you go over the lines, what actually happens is that part of the image starts to appear in the other aperture, and you don't want that. You just want the image that you want in each aperture. So my tip is to look at the cutout die really carefully, and then just with a pencil just draw a line where you can see the slight impression that the die has left, and that will give you the area that you can stamp in. So I'm going to take a little pencil now, just going to line up the die, and I'm going to just draw the shape of my aperture. But as I said, the die itself does leave this impression on the spinner wheel, so you could actually just do this by sight if you wanted to, but for effect and for the video, I'm just going to put the pencil lines in. And now what you know is you know exactly where you can stamp, but some of the images are much bigger than your aperture, and so there's another little tip coming up. One thing that you can do is you can mask off these shapes to make sure that you only stamp in that shape. So if you remember, what I said was these are the 4 different little apertures that you can have. And so if you were just stamping with the circle, you would line the circle up with the hole, and then you would draw your line with the pencil and only stamp in that circle space, for example. Same for the heart, same for the rectangle. And I think at this point, this is where I actually remember that I really need to mask it off. So here comes the post-it notes, and so the easiest way to do this for me was to use some post-it notes. I think I changed my mind here. I'm going to go with the thanks again rather than birthday wishes, so that fits quite nicely into that particular aperture. I don't need to mask it off. Squirrels are wonderful, squirrels are wonderful, squirrels are wonderful, of course. But then when I come to stamping on the other 2 apertures, I want to use some of the flowers. And so the important thing is that it's going to go over the lines, so I want to be clear about that. So little tip for the day, and this is what I'm probably talking about in the video, is that you need to mask that off. Okay, so what I do is I simply just use the sticky edge of the post-it note, and I just lie it up against the line. That's all you really need to do. That just masks off the edge. It's not going to go over the edge, and then it's not going to appear in the other aperture as it's spinning round. So I'm using the Queen Anne lace here, or cow parsley, depending where you are in the US or the UK. And then it's got this really cute little bit that goes over the top. In the UK, obviously this is green with white flowers, but so that it matches in with my card, I'm going to be using Misty Moonlight, just to make the coronet of flowers on there. Just test it, see if I want to stamp it off. I don't think I do, so I'm going to go with Squirrels are wonderful, squirrels are wonderful, squirrels are wonderful. There you go. And then you'll see when you pull off the masking, it hasn't gone outside of the aperture, so when you spin it, you know it's going to be okay. So I'm now going to change that, and then I'm going to do a different picture for the next image. Okay, so we bring back all of the components of the card. I've stamped up my greetings onto the spinner element of the card, and now we're going to put it together. So a nice sharp crease with the bone folder just to secure that fold. And then we're going to mat this up. So your mat one just gets stuck on to the front of the card like this. And there's about 1/16 of an inch gap all the way around. Right, and so the next element of it is quite important. You remember there's a little hole in the centre and there's a little hole in the spinner card as well. But what is missing is the aperture, of course. And so what we need to do is take the little aperture of your choice, line it up with the hole, like this. And then you need to decide where you want the aperture. So of course it doesn't have to be at the top, it can be at the side, at the bottom. It's entirely up to you. And then what you need to do is go away and cut that. And I think I'm going to just slightly offset this to the left so I can put a little decoration or something just on the right hand side of it. So yeah, I'm going to go off and I'm going to cut that out, and then I'm going to come back. All right, so I've cut that out. That bit's not needed for anything, so unless you can find a use for it, I would just throw it away. Take off your aperture die, and then you'll see that there's an aperture and a tiny little hole. And so you're going to line up those two holes, and then you'll see that things will start to very carefully and cleverly fit into the aperture. Of course, you can spin it round. What we want to do now is take a rubber, and I want to rub away those lines. Now, if you were just, you could, of course, as I said, you could just stamp straight onto the circle. The die itself does leave a really nice kind of impression for you to see very clearly the area that you should stamp in. But if you've used a pencil like I do, just to help you guide along, just need to rub those off. All right, so they're rubbed off, and then we can put things together. And so now that's ready to go, what we need to do is we need to find ourselves a brad. And so Stampin' Up, I've got some new black and white little brads out. Doesn't really matter what size you use, but probably a smaller one is better. So now what you want to do is you need to line up your holes and then poke your brad through and out the other side. Now don't forget, of course, your brad will show on the front of your card when you do this. And so I've swapped this now for a smaller brad, so it's tiny. But it doesn't really matter if you're using accessories or other bits and bobs, 3D items on the top of the card, it's easy to hide that brad. So once the brad's poked through, you need to flip it over. One of the things that you can do, as you can see, is you could bend the split pins down now. But what I like to do is add an extra little layer of protection. And so I've just taken a little punchy from a little scalloped, there you go, 7/8 of an inch scallop punch. And I'm just going to poke a hole in the centre of that with my pokey tool, like that. And then I'm just going to slip it on over the brad. And then I'm going to split down the brad like that. And to keep that secure and to keep it from dragging on the card underneath, I'm just going to put a really small piece of sellotape just to make that nice and smooth. Also keep it secure. It'll just make sure that the spinner card's not really loose and flapping about as it's spinning round, and that it's got a really kind of nice firm turn to it when you're actually turning the card. You don't have to do this, but obviously I think it just makes it a little bit more secure. And then what you'll see is that there's your spinner there, and it flips around like that. Now you could at this stage, of course, you could add your directional arrows if you wanted to, or you could emboss, or you could have embossed your wheel before you actually put things together. I'm not going to do that this time. And the best way to put this onto the base is to use these. Now these are the Stampin Up, and I'm going to tell you the exact name. I've forgotten them. The foam adhesive strips. We're going to be putting those strips all the way around. It's just perfect for any kind of 3D card like this, just to raise it up so that it gives the spinner room to go. There you can see an example from a previous card. And it works slightly better than dimensionals. They're slightly deeper than dimensionals for one, and they're really great for shaker cards as well. And then you're going to stick that down onto your mat. And again, there should be about a gap of about 1/16 of an inch all the way around. So just make that really level. And there you go. I like to give it a really good push down with the bone folder just to make sure that those foam strips adhere nicely. And then you can see that the wheel turns like that. Okay, and so the next thing now is decoration. I want to cover up that brad. And I'm going to do that in a number of ways. You can see in this one that I've used the scallop circle over the edge and it's covered up the brad nicely. But I think I'm going to go with the flower again. So I'm going to use this die out of the hand-penned petals. Sweet. I did look at using this intricate die, but what I found was that it was just too complex. It was very fussy on an already fussy background. So I decided that it wasn't going to work, even in one single colour like the Misty Moonlight. So I won't be using that one. But what did work nicely was the smaller flowers die cut out, and then I simply used blender pens to colour these in. These were really difficult to get off. I mean, crikey, they were stuck down on that glue. So you'll see that there's actually 3 or 4 of these little flowers, which is really great if you want to cut out quite a lot of them. And the way that I created the different hues of blue was that I just took blender pens and I just really rolled them in together, different colours. And then I used those different colours and just put the flowers on top of the different shades like this, and then I just simply run them through the die cutting machine and they cut out and they just got the blended kind of look on the front. Okay, so you can see here that the flowers have been cut out and I've just done the blended colours just by blending all different colours of green together with using the blender pens. But you could use watercolour pencils, you could use the ink pads. It's entirely up to you how you do this. You could sponge it, for example, just with different colours. All right, so once you've actually cut those out and just poke through all of the holes and get things out the way, you can see there that you've got some really lovely little hues of blues and greens, which is going to complement the card really, really nicely. As I said, you could sponge these or whatever, however you choose to colour them in. And also, I'm going to add some of these gorgeous bees that Stampin' Up have. I love these. I use them sparingly, but ooh, that's probably the problem. If you don't use them, you'll never use them. So you've got to use them at some stage, and they make a really nice thing. And then finally, I'm going to add these lovely gems onto it as well. They're just beautiful colours. And I'm just trying to desperately remember what they're called. She says as she looks in her box of tricks. Oh my gosh. Genial gems. So I'm going to use the genial gems. They're just beautiful hues of light blue and that kind of lovely sort of peachy colour. So I'm going to find my flowers. I'm going to position them on over that brad. Then decide where my little bees are going to go. Yep, that looks good to me. So once they're on, I'm just going to get some mini dimensionals, I think. So some of them will be a bit 3D and raised, and others will be just stuck onto the card. And now that you've positioned your flowers, you can just find somewhere for those little bees to go. Oh, they're the cutest. I love them. One's just been stuck with wet glue. The other one I stuck down with half a mini dimensional into position like that. There. And I'm wondering whether or not I can actually risk putting some gems into the aperture like I did with my original card. Of course, nothing's complete without a little bit of Wink of Stella, so let's wink it up. Don't forget, everybody, that Wink of Stella can act a bit like a watercolour pencil or brush, and it will move some colour around. So just be careful where you and how you apply it. And then I'm just going to finish it off with some genial gems. These are just so complementary to this colour. A few of these. Oh, I'm risking it. I'm going to put one in the aperture. Will it turn? Yes, it will. Perfect. Okay, I'll leave that there. Let's have a few more. They're so pretty. They're really pastel sort of colours. I think that'll do. Okay, so I think that just about brings the card to a finish. So let me just bring back my other cards to show you. Now, this is such a versatile little spinner wheel. I mean, you could just put anything into these apertures. And I just think, you know, party puffins, everybody. I think that would work really, really well. Anything that's got cute characters would just work so well in the little pop-up windows. So that is my Give It a Whirl card using the hand-penned petals, DSP, and stamp set, and I hope you've enjoyed it, everybody. It's such a lovely little summery card, and thanks so much for watching Stamping Squirrels. We do appreciate you coming back and watching us on YouTube, and if you've liked the video, give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you can see more of our videos. We'll be back again next time with another card from Stamping Squirrels. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.